Hey everybody, Nick here, and today we're going to do a little disassembly and maintenance of this little guy right here. This is the Benchmade 555-1. So, this is an interesting knife. It's the first of the mini grips, Benchmade mini grip Dillions, that is, to use the G10 as well as the full steel liners. The liners go all the way to the edge of this little guy here. It's not the blue, but it's right inside the blue. And that's really kind of an improvement and results in a knife that feels a lot sturdier and just feels a lot better in the hand for that matter. But aside from that, fundamentally it is still a mini grip. And so that's pretty neat. Unfortunately, though, in terms of disassembly, they've made life kind of difficult. Let's talk about how here. There are two ways to disassemble a Benchmade knife. One of them is the one I'm going to show you in a little bit here, where you just take the blade out. And this works for axis locks, by the way, not any Benchmade. The frame locks are like any other frame lock. But anyways, one is where you take the blade out. I'll show you that in a bit. The other is a full disassembly. And in order to do that on this knife, what you have to do is first remove the clip. Then you unscrew this little screw under here, which is under the clip, then this little guy, this little guy, this little guy here, and then there is another of those little screws that's sitting right underneath the clip here, so you can't see it. And these three in the back here hold the back spaces in and kind of provide positioning along the back. And then these two on the other side, which you'll also need to undo, hold the liners, the steel part, to the scales, the G10 bit. And so once you've done that and then pulled the pivot, you should be able to lift off the G10 there, and then kind of disassemble everything else, and it'll work like some of my other axis lock disassemblies. Look at, like, for instance, the Benchmade Rift. I believe I have a disassembly that goes all the way, and that'll show you how it works with the Omega springs and everything. Unfortunately, though, Benchmade has secured this screw, this screw, this screw, and this screw, that one that is, with really heavy-duty thread locker to the extent where I just can't get it loose. It's possible that using some heat, I could get that to go loose, but the thing is, it's surrounded by a G10, and this is also a knife that I'm going to be giving as a gift to a viewer. So I want to make sure it's not injured in this process here. So instead, we're going to do a very low-risk disassembly, which, to be honest with you, is all you really need to do 99% of the time. The only exception is if you, like, get the knife submerged in salt water or something, and you want to make sure you've gotten all of the gunk out from underneath the liners and whatnot. But even still, that's probably being a little bit paranoid. But all you really need to do to disassemble it and maintain it on a regular basis, just, you know, because of day-to-day wear and use, is what I'm showing you here. Step one is you use a Torx T10 bit. By the way, all these others are T6, which is independently ugly. But you take a T10 bit, and then you push, you remove the pivot screw there. Then you're going to take something relatively blunt and something much smaller than a Torx T10 bit, and then you're going to push the pivot out of the knife. There we go, like this. So I just use this, and I'm just going to guide that all the way through and out. So at this point, the blade is not being held in by anything particular, nor are the washers. And once we've gotten this far, oh, come on now. There we go. We can pull out the blade and the washers. The handle itself is sort of left as a single piece here. This is fine. There's not that much, like I said, that you actually need to get in there and do, but, you know, it just complicates things ever so slightly. Now that we've got this pulled apart, we can actually do the maintenance here. Generally speaking, the only area where you've got grit that affects the action should be in the axis lock bar here, these washers, and then on the blade itself. So we'll go on ahead and clean that off right now. It's got some Loctite on it. Let's use this one, which is clean. So I'm going to use some 91% rubbing alcohol here, and then just start wiping things down. I don't know what lubrication they're using from the factory. Whatever, it's all good. And you can see here, it's got these little holes here, which I kind of suspect, although I can't confirm it 100%, may be there to capture lubrication. Sort of, so that when they oil it at the factory, there remains some oil on the inside of the knife there. That's kind of a good idea. I can't really argue with it particularly. If that's what it's there for, and if not, hey, it's not hurting anybody particularly. So why not? Whoa there. Spraying booze all over the place here, guys. Heck of a party over here at the Shabazz household. Unfortunately, it's 91% isopropyl booze, which isn't going to be much of a party. In fact, it will kill you. So don't drink it. Well, who am I to tell you what to do? Follow your bliss. but that bliss will kill you. Alrighty, moving right along here. Alright, so I've wiped off these little guys right here. I'm going to wipe off the pivot as well, because we're going to want to re-lubricate the pivot a little bit. And because this knife is actually very, very new, it's pretty much factory fresh, I don't need to do a whole lot here, but what I am going to do is kind of wrap my an implement here with this cloth, and then use the cloth and the implement to wipe off the inside of the blade, kind of where the washers go. And you can see I am getting some gunk out of there by doing this. And all I'm doing, like I said, is removing old oil, removing dirt and dust and grime. See, maybe you can see in there. And then that'll put us in a position where when we put it back together, the only substances in there are the ones that we want to have in there. Another time where you might have to do this is if you get something sticky up in your knife, which is not a great thing either. So we're going to use, to reassemble this guy, 10-weight nano oil. And I'm going to go ahead and feed a little bit into these oil holes here. Yeah, you can see it's being kind of readily absorbed. And then I'm going to use maybe a little bit more oil than I would on any other. Well, okay, I am known for over-oiling knives, so let's just not lie to you here. I'm going to use about the same amount of oil as I usually do. But in this case, it's actually borderline correct, because what I'm trying to do is use the oil here and the surface tension from the viscosity of the oil to keep these washers attached. I mean, right now, they're kind of on there, and that's because the oil is sticking to them. And the reason I want that is because my next step is going to be to insert the blade and the washers right into this little gap here between there, and if I can keep the blade and washers together in sort of a package so everything's aligned, my life is just going to be way, way better. So, okay. Well, the best laid plans of mice and men. What I'm going to go ahead and do here is use a very thin piece of cardboard. This is actually a business card, but and I'm just going to try and get the okay, this goes that way down. So I'm going to try and just align along with this little steel tool here, which is a watch spring bar pusher. I've got a video where I talk about my disassembly, knife disassembly tools on the YouTube. So if you're curious about any of the items I'm using, go ahead and check that out. Oh, you bastard. Oh, yeah, that didn't go so hot. But anyways, you can check that video out and see exactly what I'm using. All right. Oh, let me put a little bit of lubrication while I'm at it on the pivot, just because I'm about to drop that in there anyways. So, okay, one more time with feeling. Try from a slightly different angle this time. But again, I'm just going to use this card here with the goal of sliding this little washer right up into position, so that if I drop it, the pivot in there we go, beautiful. So that when I drop the pivot in there, which I'm going to do right now, and there is probably a correct orientation. Yeah, the pivot's got a D shape to it, and the D shape, you want the flat side on the bottom. So, but either way, my goal here is that now that I've got the, yeah, beautiful. Now the pivot is actually inside that washer, so the washer itself isn't going anywhere. Next step is going to be to use my ring finger here to just pull back on the axis lock. This will allow me to reposition the blade a little bit, and it's just a question of kind of aligning things. Ah, damn, I'm not entirely within the washer. Okay. I'm going to come at it from the other side here and apply a little bit of force onto that pivot from the bottom with my index finger. So I'm pulling the axis lock. See, this is just not a great process. Okay. The dream here, and what usually happens after a suitable amount of fiddling to appease the Benchmade gods, is that you finally get everything snapped into place, or it properly aligned, that is, and then your pivot is just able to kind of pop in. And so I'm holding back the axis lock bar so that the blade can be in whatever position it sees fit to align. And then I just kind of got to get in there and move these washers until the pivot snaps in. The bigger question is, do I have the D shape still oriented properly? Yeah, I do. Hey, okay, you hear that little click? That was the pivot snapping into place with the first washer. So that's our first goal here. Next, I'm going to manipulate the blade. Okay, great. Now that I manipulated the blade, I was able to pop it through there. And then the last step here is just going to be to get this final washer in position. And this one's the easiest to do. There we go. And now the blade, now the pivot is popped all the way back through. And so we're in position. The knife is now back to where it started, and way smoother, actually. So that's kind of cool. But anyways, it's now back to where we started, and that's nice. I'm sure that somebody with a little bit more skill, who does that all damn day, would have a better shot at that. But you know what? We got through it, and so will you. I'm going to use a little bit of Loctite here, and this is something I'm trying that's brand new here. This is a medium-strength threadlocker stick, which is kind of interesting. It's like a glue stick for Loctite. A viewer of mine recommended I give it a shot, and so here I am giving it a shot. But you can use just regular blue 242 Loctite anytime, no problem. Okay. Right now, what we have to do is just make sure that the pivot is properly tightened down. And so the way that we're going to be able to tell that is that there will be zero blade play, meaning that if I shake the blade back and forth like this, it doesn't move. Zero vertical blade play, so if I shake it back and forth like on this axis, it doesn't move. And it should have a, oh yeah, it should have a relatively smooth action to go back and forth there. Yeah, that's good to go. The final step here, because this is an axis lock, and an axis lock really depends on, see, we're going to watch, and this little axis bar will slide up that way. There we go, when I put it all the rest of the way in there. And that can develop a little bit of stick, or even worse, it can kind of get stuck lower on this slope. And when that happens, you can get vertical blade play, because the lock isn't entirely locked up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a thicker weight oil, although there would be no problem with you using just the 10 weight or the Dewa Real oil, whatever you want to use. But I'm going to use a thicker oil here on this back portion. And so I'm just going to kind of apply just a little, well, that was more than just a little, onto this blade tang here. And then what happens is as I use the axis lock, that's going to distribute itself onto there and ensure that every damn time this axis lock is going to slide into its proper position. So checking one more time for blade play. Beautiful. The centering on this knife was unfortunately not perfect out of the box. That's because it's a Benchmade, and Benchmade is just not reliable for centering. But you know what? Functionally speaking, the knife is freaking okay at this point in time. There is no concern about it because the action is smooth, there's no blade play, and, you know, so that's probably as good as we're going to get. But that's okay. That's life. Anyways, I hope this has been interesting to you, and that you learned something, even though that I really do wish we could have popped this little guy open here. But whatever it is, it's a good way to take the knife apart and should be able to, you know, suffice for most of your maintenance sorts of tasks. Hope this has been interesting. Have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.